Welcome to the Delta AFA Town Hall Call. I'm Galen David here with Bobby Laurie. We're hosts of the Jet Set, a nationally syndicated travel talk show, and we're also former flight attendants and proud AFA members for life. And we're excited to be on this Delta AFA call with you tonight.
Yep, we are coming to you from the CWA District 1 headquarters in New York. And by the way, the Delta AFA has the full support of the 700,000-strong Communication Workers of America.
And we're just waiting, watching the lines as thousands are being added to the call right now. They were calling out to everybody, so it's just going to be a couple more minutes as they come online.
There's going to be a lot of great information on today's call, and to make the call as interactive as possible, you're encouraged to ask a question during the call. Just press 0, and then you'll be connected with either Taylor, Tony, Heather, or Guy, who are volunteering today to take your questions, and your questions will be submitted, and we'll get your answers for you live.
We're going to be very respectful of your time tonight and keep this town hall moving to allow for as many questions and comments to be heard as possible. And, we're just really excited about it.
So if you have any questions, press 0, and we'll get your questions submitted. And we're also, if you're interested in getting involved in the movement, you can press 1 as well.
So again, for those of you joining us, I'm Galen David, and I'm here with Bobby Laurie. We're both hosts of the Jet Set, and we're really excited to be on the call right now. So let me go ahead and introduce the person that you've all been waiting to hear from. We're delighted to have with us tonight, of course, today's most highly recognized labor leader, one of the most highly recognized labor leaders, and it's the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, International President, Sarah Nelson.
Hi, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to our town hall call talking about this exciting campaign for Delta AFA. And I know that we not only have a lot of Delta Flight Attendants on board tonight, but we also have supporters from around the industry and supporters from around the labor movement on this call, even passengers who said they'd like to know what they can do to help. But tonight we're going to focus on Delta Flight Attendants, speaking to Delta Flight Attendants, and letting you know what you have gained by working so hard and contacting AFA in the thousands and asking us to help you run a campaign, a successful campaign for union representation with our flight attendant union. So I think it's really important that we talk about why this is so important, why it matters to you, why it matters to flight attendants throughout the industry. This is all really about our bargaining power. And the truth is that, management has not given us anything throughout the years. It used to be that we had to fight just to have this job, to not have to step on a weight scale, to be able to work past the age of 32, to be able to be married, to be able to have kids, to be able to be pregnant, to be able for men to have the same rights on the job. We've fought for LGBTQ rights to make sure that everyone can have the same benefits, and we were a part of pushing towards the road to marriage equality. This is all the foundation of our union, and this has been flight attendants joining together to say that we're going to look out for each other, we're going to cut our own path through our union, and we want you to be a part of that. 80% of flight attendants in the industry in the U.S. are unionized, and our union's number one priority is to bring all flight attendants together to increase our power in order to negotiate more. So today, what's amazing is that Delta flight attendants are a part of the most successful airline in the industry, by far. Delta is outperforming other airlines with twice as much revenue, and yet you're not getting the full share of what you're contributing. So as an example, when we are at the negotiations with United, we know that United Airlines pays $100 million more a year in flight attendant costs for the same size operation as Delta. And so that is going into healthcare benefits, that's going into scheduling, that's going into other pay factors that are not just in the wage scale, and it's going into how the wage scale is created so that the majority of flight attendants can get the most pay out of that. So, and that also includes profit sharing as well. On average, MIT did a study last year to check flight attendant compensation, and on average, flight attendants at United are making $14,000 more a year than flight attendants at Delta. And so it's time really, with all the value that you're creating at Delta, to get your fair share. And so this is about putting it in writing. But it's also about having professional standing and a voice in your workplace in your own right. It's not about fighting Delta. It's about having equal standing, having that respect on the job, having that voice on the job, and really being able to contribute in everything that we do to make Delta a success. So it's also about locking in scope provisions that make sure that when there's international flying, that's not outsourced to flight attendants who are being hired in Manila. That's your work, and that should be your work. And with a union contract, we can lock that in and make sure it stays your work. It's about taking on health and safety issues in the workplace and fighting for things like the 10 hours minimum rest. We ran an incredible campaign with grassroots all across AFA to get that done, and now we're going to make sure that that happens at Delta, and Delta has promised to put that in place already, but that was AFA that pushed for that. So we want you to join us and have this strong voice in your workplace and be able to get the full share of what you are due for doing the work that you do every single day at Delta to make it such a success.
Remember to press 0, everybody, because we've got a queue that's building for questions, and we want to definitely take your questions that you've got out there. And Bobby's got a question to start off with.
Well, we do. If we're going to take your questions, press 0 to ask a question, and then also remember you can press 1 at any time to become more involved in this exciting movement. Now, Sarah, our first question coming from Christopher. He says, is there any plans to challenge the rule about no bag tags and lounge visibility?
So appreciate that very much, Christopher. If you go to deltaafa.org and click on Know Your Rights, you can learn more about what AFA is doing already to allow you to advocate for your union. So there is a letter from our General Counsel, Ed Gilmartin, to Delta, Mr. Carter, and it establishes, first of all, that you have the right to wear your AFA pin, and you should understand that when you are advocating for the union, the company cannot retaliate in any way. And it is our experience that Delta knows this and respects these rights well. That has been our experience in the past. So you've got the full backing of the union to stand up for your union, and in fact, you have more protections at work when you become a union activist. In terms of the flight attendant crew lounges and other non-work areas, we have been very clear that you have the right to speak openly and freely and discuss issues of mutual concern, reflecting as it pertains to your job in these non-work areas. So that would include in the crew lounge. And what we will do is we will just determine from Delta what are the areas that are appropriate to be in there so that we can continue to talk about the union, exercise your rights, and build that support for the union without interfering with company business. And already we have had an activist in the Seattle Crew Lounge where management has confirmed that, yes, you do have this right. They made it very clear about where it was appropriate to be sitting and conducting that advocacy, and we will continue to do that. And as this campaign builds, we will have more and more people out in the lounges and advocating. In terms of bag tags, that'll be another issue that we take on once we have our full structure of the campaign and your ability to advocate using bag tags or lanyards or whatever it may be. We will be pushing on these issues. But you're going to be able to get back into those crew lounges as we build your campaign. Another issue that is very important to flight attendants is the ability to talk about this on social media. And you do have the right with a fair and free representation election, which is provided for under the law, to express your interest in AFA online with professionals, for example, Selfies for Solidarity. We're asking people to post your picture with your AFA pin on and with the hashtag Selfies for Solidarity, and you have the right to discuss issues of mutual concern about your pay, benefits, working conditions, and your desire to join AFA. So we will protect those rights. Obviously, you want to make very clear that you're following Delta's rules about what is a non-work area and what is a work area, and you're following Delta's other policies. so that you're not offering the company an opportunity to take action against you. But be very clear about what your rights are, and they're all listed there on deltaafa.org. And if you have any questions, you can certainly write to legal@AFA-CWA.org.
Well, we have a question from an Atlanta-based flight attendant that would like to know, if I sign a card, will Delta know? I'm worried about retaliation.
I appreciate that question very, very much. We are very clear. We have some new cards that we have printed for you, and we're very clear with the information that is attached to the card, that signing this card means that you're exercising your legal right to request an election for representation rights as a member of AFA. But your request is directed to the National Mediation Board, the government agency that's charged with administering your rights under the Railway Labor Act. Your authorization, and that authorization card is valid for 1 year. Management will never see that card. They will never know unless you tell them that you signed a card, that you did. This card is confidential. It is kept in a secure location at the AFA office until we have a majority of card signers that we can submit to the National Mediation Board. But even once those cards are submitted to the National Mediation Board, Delta management is never allowed to see them.
So, Sarah, going on the topic of cards, and Guvu in Detroit says, what is the threshold of cards needed to call for an election? And Delta has said that they're going to be hiring up to 3,000 new flight attendants. How are we going to be engaging the new hires that are going to be coming on the line?
Great. These are good questions. So we need to have a majority of the seniority list, and that includes everyone from day one that they join the line. In order to call for an election, we have to have a majority of flight attendants sign cards for AFA so that we can submit those to the National Mediation Board, and they can call for that election. In terms of engaging new flight attendants on the line, that is going to be something that we do as we build this campaign, as we build a structure, because the month of November is really about reintroducing everyone, all Delta flight attendants, to the Association of Flight Attendants, asking everyone who wants to be involved. This campaign is for everyone. No one will be left out. Everyone is encouraged to join. And once we get a real sense of who really wants to be activists in this campaign over the course of the month of November, we'll start to set up your structure in each of the locations so that we've got regular activists who are doing the work of the campaign, determining where and how we can meet with those new hires. And we may have pizza parties, we may have all kinds of ways to reach out to them, but we understand it's very, very important to get that information into our newest flying partners' hands as soon as possible, and that is going to be a big part of the campaign.
And it's also important to note that if you are interested in becoming an activist, you can press 1 on your phone right now.
Yes, and we have a call from a question from Darren in New York. He says, I've started wearing my pin. I'm getting a lot of questions, and I'm not confident in answering them. Will there be tools to learn how to answer these questions?
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, that's a good question. And wearing your pin is a good conversation piece. So you will have not only the cards and pins and other tools to be able to answer questions, but the deltaafa.org site will continue to grow with information. We already started to answer some of the questions that management has put out there, some of the anti-union fallacies that management has put out there in a section called The Whole Truth on deltaafa.org. So these resources will continue to grow. But we will also be scheduling training for activists so that you can be trained in all of the things that AFA has to provide, in how to interact with your fellow flying partners without violating any of the procedures at Delta, and how to really engage people in these conversations. As it stands right now, if you don't know the answers to those questions, that's just fine. You can tell them you don't know the answer, but you can get in touch with us through the contact form on deltaafa.org, and we can get answers back to you so that you can get back to people. If you take their number or their email and be able to get back to them, we'll get you the information to be able to answer those questions that you're getting.
Well, and there's a lot of issues that we're getting via these questions, so let's go through some of these. Austin in Salt Lake City says, toxic uniforms. What will the AFA do to help with toxic uniforms? And we've actually got a couple of questions about that.
Appreciate that question so much. First of all, I really do encourage everyone to go to deltaafa.org and click on the video tab. There is about a 6-minute video about toxic uniforms and how AFA has been able to identify this relatively new issue in our workplace. So we will be putting out a process. I expect to launch this by next week to collect uniforms and conduct testing by the Association of Flight Attendants with the oversight of our industrial hygienist, Judith Anderson, who has become a real expert on this topic. And so watch the video on deltaafa.org. Look for more information on how to help us test those uniforms and provide instruction to Delta about what the best way is to make sure that flight attendants are healthy and have the support that they need. And I should just back up for just a minute. You know, we talked about cards a few minutes ago. This campaign is not just a card drive. We are going to work with you to identify the issues that you are facing on the job today, like toxic uniforms, and take on those issues and work with you right now as a union, as you build your union, to make a difference in your workplace. So this is a great example right off the bat that we intend to work with you to identify the problem, put in place a plan to get a resolution, and work with you to make that happen. And we expect that Delta is going to be very responsive. They always have in the past because they want to tell everybody you don't need the union. And that's okay. If they keep giving you a pay raise, they keep making working conditions better, then that is a sign that the union works for you. Every time Delta does that, every time Delta improves the conditions at work, we should count that as a win. That's a positive move. But it's also proof to you that having a union is really important on the job because it can make a real difference in how you experience your work.
And staying on the topic of some of the issues, a lot of questions coming in about what will happen to A-days and reserve. How will that be decided and affected, and how will that affect scheduling?
Great. Thanks for that question. So I want to put to rest the idea that voting for AFA means you get rid of A-days. That's absolutely false because what you negotiate at Delta starts with what you have today. And then only Delta flight attendants can determine what you want to change or improve or negotiate for in those negotiations. So if nobody wants to change A-days at Delta, then you're going to keep A-days at Delta. That's just the fact of the matter. And so no fears around that, and in fact, only improvements. We can work together to improve all the scheduling provisions that you have today.
I have a question from New York. So, Sarah, this person from New York asked, and this is a good question, how can we progress with AFA, with IAM on the property? Do we need to sign an AFA card if we sign with IAM?
Yeah, so the only way to get to an election is if you have a majority of card signers for a single union. So you can sign a card for AFA and you can sign a card for another union. That's not an issue. We are going to be working very, very hard to support you and promote getting enough AFA cards signed to call an election for AFA. That's the whole goal here, is to make sure that Delta flight attendants have a union, have the ability to negotiate for a contract, and have the ability to work with the rest of the flight attendants around the industry to lift our careers. And I should just note that we've seen incredible support from our flying partners around the industry. All 20 airlines and AFA, the flight attendants from 20 airlines and AFA support you. We've also had support, incredible support from American flight attendants. An American flight attendant interfaced with Cory Booker on a flight, and Cory Booker put out a support message for Delta flight attendants. And we've heard support from Southwest flight attendants and JetBlue flight attendants. And the 80% of flight attendants in the U.S. airline industry who are organized are all supporting you in working for a representation election for AFA and to build your union and to raise the standards for all of us as flight attendants.
Now, Sarah, you actually touched on this next question a little bit, but I think it's worth repeating. Robert in Atlanta, what are AFA's plans for running a positive campaign, because there have been negative experiences in the past?
Okay, appreciate that very much. A absolute pillar of this campaign is that we are going to be positive. We are stronger together and we are better together. And there is nothing that can divide us that is so great that is more important than what unites us. And what unites us is making our job as aviation's first responders the best it can be, with the best safety, health, and security provisions to do our work, and the best respect from our companies for the value that we create. So we are going to be adamant that we are supportive of each other, that we are good to each other, and that this campaign is a very positive campaign, because it's also not about fighting with Delta. It's about saying to Delta, we expect to have a voice on the job and respect in our own right through our flight attendant union.
Well, I've got a very practical question, a couple of them from Florida, where they want to know, a couple of people ask us, how much will dues be? Is there a formula for that?
Oh, okay. So AFA dues are a flat $50 rate, but that is not even something that you need to worry about at all, because voting for the union simply means that you gain the right to bargain for your contract, and not until you actually achieve that contract and vote it in as Delta Flight Attendants do you start paying dues. At that point, if you just put it in this perspective, if Delta Flight Attendants are paying $15 million a year in dues, at a minimum, you're going to match that United contract, except we expect to do much better. So you're going to put $100 million back in your pockets for that investment. And so you're going to do much better than that. You're going to get back much more than you pay in dues, and those dues are only about negotiating the contract and enforcing it. And you don't start paying until you ratify that agreement that has all those improvements that you can put right in your pocket and in your quality of life at your job.
I think that's also worth repeating, because that is a question from Atlanta. Dues are not required to be paid until after the first contract is ratified.
That's correct. You don't pay dues until after your contract is negotiated and ratified by you.
All right, and we also have a couple of questions in here about how do we know if our authorization card is still up to date?
Okay, so we have been receiving requests from thousands of Delta flight attendants to run an official AFA campaign. And on Friday, we confirmed for you that we are going to run an official AFA campaign. So we will be sending email confirmations and letters in the mail, if we do not have an email, to confirm with you that your card is on file and the date it is good until. So you will have that confirmation. And if you don't get that confirmation, then you should check back, because it is possible sometimes 1% of the mail doesn't usually get through. So if there was some glitch somewhere and you don't get that confirmation within the next couple weeks, or within a couple weeks of signing your card, then you should check back with AFA and make sure that you've got a card on file.
And just a reminder to press 1 if you'd like to step up and join the movement and become part of the action to get the word out and get people excited about this. Now, also, press 0 so that you can ask a question, because we definitely want to answer as many questions as possible. Bobby?
From Washington, D.C., Sarah, what steps should a flight attendant take if they're experiencing retaliation from a coworker or the company?
Okay, well, this is a good question. So the first step you should take is to document that interaction and get that to legal@AFA-CWA.org. We will actually have an intake form on the website going forward that you'll be able to access. But for now, you can send an email to legal@AFA-CWA.org. In the future and right away, you'll have access to AFA, EAP, and professional standards. What we do, just like the pilots do, is we resolve issues among our work group. So if you have someone who you're having issues with on the plane, you can go to AFA, EAP professional standards, and we'll work to resolve those issues just within our work group without having to take those things to management. Separately, though, if this seems to be specific retaliation against you for being a union activist, then we do need to get those issues to AFA Legal, and we will take steps to advocate for you and support you and work with you on how you'd like us to do that as well. So we will interface with you and talk with you about a plan to support you in addressing that retaliation.
Sarah, I have a question. How long between, winning a campaign and getting the first contract?
That's a good question. So the first thing that would happen after you win an election is there's a 30-day process where we ask everyone in each of your bases who do you see as a leader in your base? Who would you like us to appoint to positions to lead and set up your union structure so that you can be putting together your negotiating committee and also have people to look to as leaders in your base? And so that will be 30 days in. Then we will start to form the survey of what you want to negotiate, and that will be a couple months because we're going to want to really hear from you about what your priorities are. And then negotiations will begin, and we'll keep you informed. You'll know what's happening every step of the way. If we have people vote for AFA in large numbers, the reality is that that's a leg up in negotiations because management knows that everyone is supporting the union and wants you, and they need to listen to the union about what your priorities are because we are all really united and ready to force management to deal with us fairly. So we can get an agreement done. We have gotten an agreement done in 1 year's time before. That is absolutely possible. It may be one or a little bit more time, 1 year or a little bit more time, but it's really about whether or not you show management that you're united and united behind those proposals and the priorities that you set. And we will run a very strong campaign together to encourage management to come to an agreement with us. We've seen how quickly Delta acts on things to avoid bad press, to avoid any conflicts, to avoid having a bad relationship, frankly, with their employees. So we expect that Delta, once you let them know that you want to have this collective bargaining process, will deal with you fairly.
So, Sarah, we have a couple of questions about, and we're getting close to our time here, so if you do have a question, press 0, and if you would like to get involved in the AFA, press 1. Now, Sarah, here's a couple of questions about negotiating a contract. When it comes to delinquent dues, we're hearing a lot about how this would be something that would be detrimental in getting someone to sign a card. They don't want to sign a card because of the repercussions of not paying their dues.
Oh, okay. Well, this is not an issue. When we negotiate the contract, we also negotiate a provision where dues are paid right out of your paycheck, so it's not something that you have to think about. If there's an issue where you are not getting a paycheck, the union works with you and lets you know if there's an issue with your dues. We reach out to you, work with you. If there are extenuating circumstances with your family, get you on a payment plan so that it can be addressed. And when you are on leave or you are out on medical leave, you're not required to pay those union dues. So this is not something that you need to worry about. Those dues are about having the benefits that will help you take care of yourself and your family in difficult times. And if there's a glitch in the system or something, our membership department works very, very hard to get in touch with you and work with you to resolve it. So don't worry about that.
So also we have Tamara in Atlanta now, previously Seattle. If the AFA is voted in, what happens to past records of disciplinary action or records of attendance? Is anything still going to be counted against us?
Well, that's a really good question, and I appreciate it. We negotiate in our contracts typically that after a period of time, any negative records need to be purged from our personnel files. And this is a very common provision in AFA contracts and many union contracts. So you can expect that once we get that contract in place, you would know exactly where you stand with the company and when any sort of negative records will be purged from your personnel file.
We have a final question. So from Amanda, why is this time different than previous times?
That is a great question. What's different? So what's different today is that in 2010, we were coming off the era of bankruptcies. It was a very painful era following the events of September 11, 2001. And everyone took cuts. Everyone saw job losses. Everybody saw pensions terminated or frozen. And then there was the era of mergers. And in those initial mergers, management also figured out how to pit people against each other and be fearful of each other. And today, you are all flying together. You all know how much it takes to work together to make Delta work. You have shared experiences. You've shared pictures of your kids. You've gotten to know each other. You know each other's hearts and souls. And you have a common goal. And since that last vote in 2010, over 40% of the seniority list has been newly hired. And this next generation knows what it means to work together to make our world better. They understand that the world has not necessarily been left to them perfectly by the people ahead of them, and that they have to gather together to work to make it better. That's the mood of this next generation. And if you look at the polling, this country has never been more supportive of joining unions, of thinking favorably about unions, and those numbers are well over the 70s in the next generation. So all of this is coming together with the fact that AFA has been very prominent out there in the media, on Capitol Hill, recognized by passengers, recognized by the families of the Boeing 737 MAX as advocates for safety, health, and security, recognized by federal workers as advocates for our safety, health, and security, recognized by passengers everywhere that flight attendants are going to take a strong stand for safety, health, and security in the industry. And that has brought incredible respect. And so all of that comes together to create a lot of momentum and a lot of support for this campaign. I should just note, too, that we do have passengers on this call. We do have people from other unions. We've heard from the Painters Union, from the Teamsters, from the teachers, from state employees, from federal employees. All of these unions getting behind you and union members getting behind you and wanting you to be successful in this campaign. We've heard from Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker and the international president of the Airline Pilots Association immediately talking about their support of Delta Flight Attendants joining this movement and working for AFA representation. So all of that is in your favor, and you have a strong union that's on strong financial grounds to be able to run a really strong campaign and support you in this, and it's like never before. And so we're going to run a positive campaign about the fact that we are stronger together and better together. And I can't wait to get out and meet more of you this month. In November, we're going to be all over the system, and so are other flight attendants from all these other airlines to welcome you and encourage you to get involved. And you just need to know that you are not alone. Delta flight attendants are not alone anymore. We stand with you, and we're all going to stand together.
Well, I would encourage all of you, any of you that are on the call that want to get involved, you're ready to press 1 and become a volunteer, to go ahead and press it. And let's get your name. We want to get you started and get you all the information you need. Bobby?
Sarah, this has been an amazing call, and we've got through a lot of questions. And we hope that, like Galen said, that a lot of you, if you want to get involved, press 1 right now to get involved. And if we did not get to your question tonight, do remember that you can visit deltaafa.org to get more information and to stay informed. And we do encourage all of you to wear your AFA pins and speak with your coworkers and get involved.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great night, and we'll see you very soon.
Good night.